Fire. Earth. Lightning. Air. Long ago, the three races lived together in harmony. But everything changed when the sequels attacked. Only Blizzard, master of all things Starcraft, could balance them. But when the community needed them most, they scandaled. Months passed, and the community discovered a new way to revive the game: challenge runs. And although most of the interesting ideas have already been done, there's a lot to explore before the game is completely dead. But I believe challenge runs can save Starcraft.
A Sith Lord?
Previously on the Elemental Challenge.
Your strategy against the Terrans was strange, but I understand it now.
The rules are simple. Only use units that use lightning. Only use Spear of Adun abilities that involve lightning. Only use Kadaran monoliths and shield batteries for static defense. The run will officially begin with Dark Whispers, which gives access to probes, sentries, Templar, and Archons, all lightning-y units. The run will be done on hard. Difficulty. Anyways, I start off with... Hold up, let me just... There, much better. Anyways, I have access to probes, sentries, Templar, and Archons. I rush out sentries for early attacks, using Guardian Shield and Shield Restore to keep them alive. Later on, I add Archons to my team, using them to tank and deal damage. Eventually, I destroy the final cell, and the mission ends. Fun fact, lightning flashes around 3 million times a day, with an average of 44 strikes a second. Lightning strikes occur most often at Lake Maracaibo in Venezuela, where thunderstorms occur from 140 to 160 nights a year. There can be up to 40,000 lightning strikes in a single night. Apparently being a Sith Lord requires a lot of gas, so naturally Ghosts in the Fog doesn't give me any geysers. In between raids, I send dozens of Atlas workers to steal Vespene every time it erupts.
Some of you may die, but it's a sacrifice I am willing to make.
Eventually, I add Archons and Tempest to my army and push to the vault, ending the mission. Boy, what about the other missions? What do you mean? You always go to Glacius after Eris. It's not like there's 5 minutes straight of me not getting lightning units aside from probes. Anyways, ever the pal, Karax gives me useful sentries.
They are quite effective at restoring shields to nearby warriors.
Oh, Karax, you always know what to do. Anyway, since I don't get access to High Templar until Harbinger of Oblivion, this will be a mostly sentry-only run for a while. Massing my Ticklebots, I used feigned retreats to lure defenders out, focus down the zealots, and take out the remaining enemies. I make sure to return to base every so often, since I don't have much in the way of defenses.
Do what must be done.
With the last of my sentries, I fight my way to the vault, and the mission ends. Fun fact, the taser was invented in the mid-70s by Jack Cover. It's actually an acronym for Tom A. Swift Electric Rifle, named after the Tom Swift book series about gadgets, which were a favorite of Cover's. They were introduced to law enforcement due to a problem with the current escalation of force. Verbal, hand control, handcuffs, mace, batons, and guns. Since there was a gap between baton and gun, the taser was intended as a less lethal way of disabling a criminal. In practice, success has been mixed. It's time to save Shakuras. Vorazun tries to sabotage me by giving me useless Dark Templar, but I rush out sentries. I then proceed to build up my sentry count as I fight my way to each launch bay, bringing down Nidus Worms, Ultralisks, and even Void Thrashers. They may zap, but they fight for my enemies, so they're crap. Eventually I clear the last launch bay, and the mission ends. Last Stand requires me to face the Zerg infestation of Shakuras with only my measly sentries and shield batteries. Ever the pal, Karax gives me Aaron monoliths, slow-firing towers that are great at sapping enemy armor. For defense, I use monoliths and shield batteries to tank while focusing down threats with my sentry force. To ensure that my sentry production is up to speed, I take the nearby expansion and quickly nab the geysers for extra Vespine. After clearing the Zenith stones, I fortify the base in a ring of monoliths, sentries, and shield batteries. Despite heavy attacks by both the hybrid and the Zerg, time runs out, and the mission...
I have discovered a solarite cache beneath the Xel'Naga temple. If we can hold longer, I should be able to retrieve it.
Oh, no problem, Karax. You always know what to do. After waiting for 1.5 billion Zerg, I overload the temple, and the mission ends. Next, it's time to go to Core Hall.
But Pi, how'd you go to Glacius and Shakuras if you didn't go to Core Hall first?
What? You always go to Core Hall after those two. There's absolutely nothing wrong with this mission order. It's not like I went back to the Master Archives and just replayed the missions with sentries. Ridiculous. Anyways, after sending my zealots to early retirement, I mass a force of sentries and establish a line of shield batteries near the first stabilizer. I then lure the enemy back to the batteries, allowing my sentries to stay alive. Karax reveals there's EMP generators on the platform.
You use my own spells against me.
After hunting them down, I gather my taser squad and secure the remaining stabilizers, ending the mission. Fun fact, EMP is short for electromagnetic pulse. While envisioned as a dangerous way of disabling electronics en masse, the actual risk of EMP attacks is rather low. EMPs are generated as a side effect of nuclear explosions, so to create an effective pulse, you need an actual nuke. Replicating this effect through non-nuclear methods is both expensive and likely impossible. Furthermore, to increase the blast radius, the nuke would need to detonate at a higher altitude, which would actually weaken the effect. So ultimately, if an EMP does go off, it'd be more prudent to worry about the nuke that caused it. I have to save the keystone from the enemy. While it's a disgusting rock that sets things on fire, I do need it to free my people. I ask Karax to give me Archons, but he presses the Immortal button instead. They don't zap, so they're crap. Nevertheless, I give Karax a hug. 'Tis an honest mistake.
Yes.
Anyways, I rush out sentries and build up lines of shield batteries to hold off the initial hybrid attacks. As long as I keep enough of my allies alive, they can finish off the enemy. Eventually, I build enough sentries to begin moving beyond my batteries. Using Guardian Shield to protect my boys, I focus down each hybrid and push to the end of the map. My sentries retrieve the keystone, and the mission ends. Next, I head to Ulnar. I ask Karax for Corsairs, but he presses the Phoenix button instead. Since they don't sap, they're crap. Nevertheless, I pat Karax on the back. It's an honest mistake.
Yes.
Instead, I mass a force of sentries and push to each of the temple locks. After fortifying each lock with shield batteries and Aaron monoliths, I move on to the next one. I also take out a Titanic warp prism, which Karax says has more solarite. What a good guy. While my defenses at the 4th lock are overrun, I manage to seize the 5th lock before the enemy retake it, ending the mission. Infinite Cycle is a mission about infinite cycles. I get access to Artanis and Garrigan. Both of them can zap.
But Pi, Artanis uses his blades to fight.
Actually, he zaps air units. Also, his main ability is literally called Lightning Dash. Sounds like a Sith Lord to me. Anyways, with the two of them, I fry my way to each shrine.
These people are maniacs.
Yes, Kerrigan. People who are brainwashed and mind-controlled tend to be a bit unhinged. I'm sure you've never experienced this, of course.
By your will, Father, I live to serve. Let all who oppose the Overmind feel the wrath of the Swarm.
Fun fact, electroshock or electroconvulsive therapy involves the brief electrical stimulation of the brain while under anesthetics. It's generally a last resort method of treating severe depression or bipolar disorder when all other treatment has failed. It carries the risk of memory loss, difficulty learning, and possibly worsening a patient's condition. However, it may be more effective and works faster than certain medications. I finally regain access to useful Templar. With their psionic storms and Archon merge, they synergize well with sentries. To attack each of the crystals, I form a combined force of sentries, Templar, Archons, and Corsairs to storm the enemy bases. Sentries heal, Templar storm and feedback, Archons tank, and Corsairs use Disruption Web to disrupt with web. Eventually, I destroy each lock, and the mission ends. Alright, hopefully Steps to the Right is pretty chill this time. After resetting, I fortify my base with Gateran monoliths and shield batteries before massing a force of sentries, Templar, Archons, and Corsairs. Corsairs disrupt enemy defenses, Templar storm, Archons tank, and sentries heal. By the end of the mission, I toss in a couple of probes to join in on the fun. After beating all 4 Guardians, the mission ends. It's time to rack the shears. To win the mission, I use a diverse army with complex maneuvering to win. Also, Solarite.
The Death Fleet descends.
Now I have all of them. My preliminary scans indicate that the Solarite deposits are a byproduct of the beast's unusual digestive system.
Are you saying that they're... Wait. Never mind. I do not wish to know.
Oh, Karax, you always know what to poop. Fun fact, chain or bead lightning is a form of lightning that lasts longer than usual and appears as segments rather than one continuous channel. It is caused when lightning meets interference in the atmosphere en route to the ground, which causes the beam to seemingly break apart. Next, I head to Templar's Charge to get capital ships. I ask Karax for Tempests, but he presses the carrier button by accident. They don't zap, so they're crap. Nevertheless, I pat Karax on the back. 'Tis an honest mistake, reader.
Yes!
Instead, I mass a force of Corsairs and Destroyers to take on Mobius Corps. Corsairs disable everything on the ground, while Destroyers pull up Palpatine and finish everything else. I also take the time to destroy the hybrid chambers for more Solarite.
That went better than I'd hoped.
Oh, Karax, you always know what to say. After destroying all 3 cores, the mission ends. Next, I head to Endion.
What you plan to do is awaken monsters, Artemis.
That's the point, Sergeant.
I assume your plan is to bind these robotic warriors to your will.
You're goddamn right.
I ask Karax to give me lightningy Wrathwalkers, but he presses the Colossus button by accident. They burn instead of zapping, so they're only good for crapping. Nevertheless, I pat Karax on the back. 'Tis an honest mistake, reader.
Yes!
Since I'll be fighting Zerg for the next few missions, I choose Ascendants as my casters to cast some good old psionic orbs, ball lightning. Using the zappy megalith to tank, I build up a force of sentries, Ascendants, and Tempests. As always, sentries heal, while Ascendants zap and Tempests fry enemies with long-range attacks. Whenever static defense is encountered, I use Disintegrate to disintegrate. For the bonus, I use my Tempest to electrocute the targets with impunity. Eventually, I reach the final stasis lock, and the mission ends. Now it's time to restore power to Cybros. Phoenix tries to sabotage me by telling me to use useless photon cannons to defend the station's generator, so I build shield batteries and Gateran monoliths instead. As with the last mission, I use the old Sentry Ascendant Tempest Strike Force. With each set of null circuits destroyed, the purifiers reawaken and clear the main Zerg hives. I even nab a few enemy geysers to help refill my gas reserves. Eventually I clear each null circuit, and the mission ends. Fun fact, ball lightning or globe lightning is a rare type of lightning in the form of a glowing orb that occurs during thunderstorms. It can be red, orange, yellow, white, or blue, and emits a hissing sound and notable odor. While it can cause burning or melting, it's relatively harmless. Its cause is unknown, though some speculate air or gas acting on, or even radiation trapped in a plasma bubble. This mission isn't really doable as a Sith Lord. At least, not all of it. In the spirit of the run, for the second area I limit myself to Karax and only build sentries from the enemy gateways. For the third segment, I try to only use Artanis and Speedy units because lightning is fast, but there's too many enemies, so I have to finish the mission normally. For the next mission, it's time to host. Some destroyers, that is. After fortifying my position with batteries, monoliths, and sentries, I summoned the Death Fleet and later add Tempest for longer range. With destroyers for splash damage and Tempest for heavier targets, I take out each Void Shard and end the mission.
All vessels, ready your weapons, now!
Colossi de Templar.
We live. The talons have slain, listen.
These skies are mine.
Direct my vengeance.
Templar, unleash your fury!
Void energy levels dropping. Amon's host has been destroyed.
It's time to save the Templar. I realized that I could have been using Chrono Surge and Shield Overcharge the entire time since they both look kind of electrical, so I toss them in. I also choose Matrix Overload since it speeds up all my units, which sounds pretty lightningy, and mitigates the mission's main issue, mobility. Early on, there's enemy attacks on opposite sides of the map. These force me to constantly move around and later on split up my forces. However, with Matrix Overload, I can build a highway of pylons to zip around each entrance. Building up a force of sentries, destroyers, tempests, monoliths, and shield batteries, I sap my enemies into oblivion.
Keystone is approaching maximum energy output. Victory is nearly upon us. Do not lose hope, brothers.
I won't, Carax. The Keystone charges, and the mission ends. Fun fact, a power surge is a sudden increase in voltage which can damage or destroy electronics. The major causes include lightning strikes and changes in the electrical grid. To prevent this, the use of power strip surge protectors can help divert surges into the ground. It's time to head into the void. I've already failed the mission since I only have useless non-lightning-y units. I suppose you could argue they're mechanical and thus surely run on some kind of electricity. But as the famous philosopher Sheev Palpatine once said, if they're not sapping, they're trapping. Anyways, afterwards I build up a diverse army and use complex maneuvering to clear the enemy positions. Periodically, Narud sends traitorous Void Thrashers against my allies. In a normal run, I'd save them, but Sith have no time for such frivolous actions as helping my friends, so I push through the map while letting as many of my allies fall to deal with the Thrashers. Eventually I push to the end and finish off Narud, ending the mission. For the next two missions, since I don't play as Protoss, I decided to switch back to the Arsonist and Mole Man rules respectively. And I've already failed this mission. I have to use Celestial Kerrigan, who uses lightning? I don't know, this run's been weird. Anyways, I get access to my base and start pushing out Perdition.
But you can't do this to me.
Okay, at least I have Hellbats in this mission. Unfortunately, there's too many enemies to fight using Hellions alone, so I have to resort to Celestial Kerrigan.
So, Pi, what's your excuse for breaking the rules this time?
She's the Avatar, I guess. Screw the rules. Anyways, I block off the northern ramp to funnel enemies into my Hellions. There isn't much I can do for my allies beyond adding turrets to Artanis' base and sending my Hellions south when needed. Otherwise, I use Celestial Beam to burn out priority targets until 90%, at which point I promptly let my allies fall because that's the Arsonist way. Finally, it's back to Mole Man rules. Celestial Kerrigan obviously can't be used since she can't burrow and instead hovers in the air. So I go with good old Impaler Spore Crawler. Surprisingly, Impalers do really well against void constructs and crystals. The biggest issues are my need to spread creep and the long wait between vulnerable crystals. Nevertheless, my allies slowly build up their armies and the combined Arsonist Mole Man Sith force destroys the last crystals, ending the mission. Fun fact, the average lightning strike contains about 1 million joules. Harnessing this amount of energy would be difficult, as the energy is only contained for a short period, and would require electronics to handle several million volts. While drawing in strikes is easy enough, designing a system that can take the strike and convert it into usable energy would be incredibly expensive and inefficient. So can you? Nope. I had to lower the difficulty because of how weak my arsenal was early on, and due to several time-sensitive missions like Dark Whispers and Forbidden Weapon. There's also the fact that between Evil Awoken and the end of the Korhal Shakura's missions, the only zapping unit I get is the probe. Nevertheless, how many missions was I able to do with this modified run? In total, 2 out of the 3 prologue missions can be done using lightning units. For the main campaign, 14 out of 19 missions can be done using lightning units. None of the epilogue can be done using lightning units only, so if I add it up, it gets a total of 16 out of 25 missions that can be done as a Sith Lord. The Sith Arsenal's main drawback comes not from the units, rather being in a campaign where most of them aren't available until later on. For a good chunk of the early missions, there's simply no zappy units except for probes and sentries. Considering the fact that many early missions are time-sensitive, it often meant getting dozens of sentries to kill a handful of enemies within a short period of time. And of course, Sith Lords need lots of Vespene and construction time to actually accomplish anything. It's a shame I couldn't beat this on hard. Maybe some of the later missions were doable, but after struggling to beat even the first prologue mission on hard as a Sith Lord, I figured I'd take the loss and move on. Remember, I'm doing these first and foremost because they're fun. Anyways, it's time for another poll. Now, I'm doing the Zookeeper challenge after the Nova Covert Ops Elemental video, but afterwards the way is open. After reviewing all my comments over the last few months, I've gathered the ideas I think are most interesting and doable, so make sure to vote. If you have any suggestions, comment below. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and Karax because he was a good boy in this video.